Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Technology Source Virtual Roundtable. If you don't know much about our virtual roundtable, each month Technology Source assembles industry experts from across the US and around the world to discuss unique solutions to your most difficult problems. Today's event is no different. During today's virtual roundtable, our panel experts will discuss unique solutions for the prevention of ransomware attacks. And be sure to ask any questions you have during our chat if you're joining us live today. I want to share a little bit about Technology Source and what we do. We're a technology advisory firm. Technology Source works alongside of your team to create best-in-breed solutions. Technology Source represents over 500 providers in managed IT services, cybersecurity, telecom, and mobility services. We work closely with our partners to reduce operational expenses and improve efficiencies while helping to deliver an outstanding experience for their customers. And I think you'll see an example of that today. From a value proposition standpoint, there are a few things that we do that we think stand out, one of which is escalation support. Implementation can sometimes be challenging, and we're here both during the initial implementation phase and post-sale to ensure you have good experience. We provide leverage, right? As a distributor in the industry, we have a lot of providers that want us to recommend their product. So that provides you with leverage to assist with those escalations as needed. Recommendations are critical to our business. We utilize an exclusive 15-point provider selection checklist to ensure that the providers that we recommend to you fit your needs, fit your budget, and more importantly, had a great implementation experience with us in the past, right? Negotiation, I find this is a big one where we add a lot of value, just being able to help customers get the very best price by negotiating with our providers to get to the key price that you need to make that deal move forward. Budget creation. So often folks find great solutions, but find later on that they don't have the budget in order to acquire that solution. We assist with the fee-free audit, where we can identify cost savings in other parts of your business that then can be reinvested into high priority projects, such as the one we're going to talk about today. Quarterly business reviews help us align with your business objectives and identify upcoming projects. This allows us to remain as a key resource within your organization. We view our clients as client partners. We aren't looking for a one-time sale. We're looking for a long-term relationship with our clients. All right, well, great. This brings us to our panel experts today. We've got three with us. Mike Pearson, CISSP and a certified ethical hacker with Passpoint Security. Wade Tucker, CISO at Passpoint Security. And our very own Sean Mooney, CISSP with Technology Source. So we brought the experts together. We wanted to ask them a few questions about ransomware and what's happening. We're seeing some crazy statistics. The most recent one shows that 3 out of 4 ransomware victims had up-to-date endpoint protection when they were infected. That's kind of a startling, piece of information. I wouldn't have expected that. And I want to ask the panel, why isn't endpoint protection enough? Why do we need to layer ransomware impact analysis on top of that? Who wants to take that question?
I can jump in.
Sure.
Well, just the very nature of the acronym itself, endpoint detection and response suggests that it's a responsive, tactic or responsive control. So, while we try to put in, a whole host of, complete controls, if you want to call it, we really do struggle to. Most of them in nature are responsive to the threat. In this case, ransomware. So I think the whole industry has always really struggled to understand the nature of ransomware. It evolves so quickly, and just staying ahead of that curve is always going to be a challenge. I think what we're going to talk about today, with what Mike and his team have put together, certainly close the gap significantly. We can get into that, I'm sure, but it's just the nature of cybersecurity controls, and how they fit into the overall, risk mitigation strategies. So,
yeah, if I could just add to that, guys, couple of things. One, we've seen a lot of really movement in the recent years to think protecting the endpoint is all you have to do. And what ends up happening is when you have a statistic like this, and there's lots of reasons why this is the case, but just protecting the endpoint is not going to go far enough to completely protect your organization. Sean mentioned additional controls there, and it really comes back to a concept that's been around in this industry for decades, and that's defense in depth. And that's the ability to have multiple layers of security for both detection and prevention and eradication throughout the organization. Just touching on why 3 out of 4 still get hit, and Sean mentioned this, it's a constant evolving threat. Thousands and thousands of new variants come out every day for different malware. And then it's also implementation. In a lot of cases, you go purchase the latest and greatest endpoint protection, but if you don't have it correctly implemented, monitored, and managed, then there's going to be gaps.
Yeah.
I'd like to add to that too as well. So, and this is another way I really like to simplify things for folks. Okay, because there's a lot of folks out there that are trying to understand what they need to do. I talk to customers, and prospects every day. Do we need to do this? Do we not need to do this? I really like to simplify things, and I like to put, really correlate cybersecurity with really how you manage, your life and your own self and your own, health as an individual, right? Why is endpoint protection enough? Basically, what you're trying to do is you're trying to increase your cybersecurity hygiene. You're trying to protect your organization. You're trying to keep yourself, your network clean. You're trying to continue to operate at the level of efficiency that your organization has always been, trying to operate at. And just like in life, it's not about just eating well. Okay, you just can't eat well and be in great shape. There's other aspects of it. Mike talked a little bit to in cyber industry, they call the multi-layer strategy. Okay, well, also with from a personal perspective, there's a multi-layer process that you have to put into place, to keep your own hygiene at a high level, right? And people, it's interesting how, and we may talk about this a little bit later on, how when they look at how they manage their network and how they manage themselves are sometimes done in completely opposite sides, right? Completely different. And, this is one of them, right? A lot of organizations out there, they're looking for the easy pill, okay? And especially small to medium-sized businesses. Mike, I'd like to hear your kind of your answer to this, or even comments to this too here as well in a minute. But a lot of this, where we also see these 3 to 4 ransomware victims having endpoint detection solutions when they're infected, it are a lot of these smaller to medium-sized businesses that are looking for a way to put together what they would consider a program or a process, but a lot of them just don't have the time or the people to implement these things. So what are they doing? They're looking for the easy pill. I go back to, how you manage yourself as a person. Okay. Why do you think these diet pills are so big? Nobody wants to actually put in the work and the effort to put together a multi-layer strategy of going to the gym, eating right, doing the things that you have to do to keep yourself at a healthy level, right? They want to put together at their organization a very sophisticated, multi-layer remediation program that leverages a lot of different types of technologies and put together. No, they're looking for the easy pill. And so what are they doing? They're implementing these endpoint protection solutions because they're being oversold as kind of the silver bullet that you buy this tool, you implement this tool, and you're going to be safe. And they hear from a lot of the sales guys, well, guess what, look at our list of customers that we've got. We've got Delta, we've got Amazon, we've got, Tesla, we've got Waste Management, we've got all these huge organizations are using us. What they don't tell them is that all those organizations have highly sophisticated vulnerability management programs, to Mike's point, these very sophisticated multi-layer security strategies in place that they're doing, and they're doing on a consistent basis, also to Mike's point, that this is an ever-changing threat landscape, right? And that's what happens, right? They put all their eggs in one basket. They don't validate that these tools are working, okay? And then they wonder why they get hit with ransomware, 75% of the time, right? So it's a pretty easy thing if you really kind of break it down and think about it, not just from a very sophisticated cybersecurity perspective, but more of like a how would you manage your life? How do you do those types of things? And you really kind of simplify this process. It does take time. It does take energy, just like anything else in life worth doing. It takes some time to get it done. And same thing with cybersecurity. It's not about just implementing an endpoint protection solution. You've got to validate this stuff. You've got to put together programs. You've got to put in the time and effort to make it work. Or, to your data point here, Rob, it's not going to.
So Wade, from what I'm hearing from this group is that endpoint protection and response isn't enough. You have to continuously audit and validate that those solutions are working, or you could get caught. And I think that really brings us to a brief explanation. We've had the opportunity to chat before the call and explain what I would consider this revolutionary new service you put together over at PassPoint. Could you explain how your ransomware impact analysis works and how it provides that audit and analysis piece that folks that are using endpoint management, endpoint security really need in order to secure their network?
Yep. Wade, do you want to go first on that one?
I can. Sure. So yeah. So the whole thing around ransomware impact analysis goes back into that trust but verify. Okay. You want to put in a multi-layer strategy, like Mike mentioned. Okay. The first thing is that you can't just buy the technology. You've got to implement the technology. Once the technology is implemented, you got to make sure that it's implemented correctly. Okay. It's just like, again, you look at anything else that you do in your life. You don't just take someone's word for it. You test it to make sure it's going to hold water. Then when it does, then hey, it's validated here. That's really what from a high level. Okay. One of the things about our ransomware impact analysis that's a huge benefit is that for a fraction of the cost of what some of these organizations are paying to implement and keep these tools working, we can come in and validate that they actually are working. Okay. So, you buy these programs, and we talked about this before, Rob, in the past on other sales calls that we've been on, with different organizations. And we see organizations out there paying $5, $10, $15, upwards of $20,000 a month for tools that when you look at the statistics, are failing a lot. Okay, from organizations who got hit with ransomware, they had these tools in place 75% of the time. I can guarantee you that 100% of that 75% would have loved to have known that those tools were going to fail. Okay, and we could have given them that visibility way before that would have happened. And I guarantee you the cost to remediate those networks would have been significantly less, or which would have been significantly more than the cost of this tool to implement, have this on hand to be able to, periodically check their organization, to make sure that those things, are working and working properly.
Yep. So to add into that, Wade, and I like using your analogy around health in the body and what you do for yourself. And it's, you don't just trust that, you've been cured of cancer. You constantly are being checked up, and, you're having things like MRIs or CAT scans that go in and are observing what's going on the inside of your body. Right. And potentially detecting new things, or just validating that everything is okay. And that, in its essence, is what our ransomware impact analysis is with the Cimerex platform. Is it allows you to test the security controls that you have in place. It allows you to validate their effectiveness, and it allows you to justify the ongoing spend or budget that you're utilizing to purchase these tools and put in place these practices and programs. So in essence, what it is an ability for us to go in and demonstrate inside of a customer network on their production network, what a ransomware attack would look like across all of their systems. So we call that the blast radius. Right? How far deep and wide could a potential ransomware attack spread? And it tests across, all of those layers. It's not just looking for software vulnerabilities like a vulnerability scan. It's not just trying to exploit software vulnerabilities like a pen test would. It's actually testing all layers of the defense from a structural analysis point of view, and to be able to determine exactly, how far deep and wide that blast radius would look inside an organization. And it's all perfectly safe to run in a production environment.
How often do you recommend our client partners utilize this? How does this work? Is it a one-time, one fee, or is it monthly? Can you walk us through how that structure works?
Yeah, and I think Sean and Wade will probably have some different answers on this. It depends a lot on what you're trying to accomplish. This process certainly falls within inside of a traditional risk assessment process. So if you have compliance initiatives that require that, some require, you do that on an annual basis, some quarterly basis. And if that's just if you want to check the compliance checkbox, right? But if you're actually trying to be proactive about your security, we have two different offerings here. One is, where we can come in from one-time consulting basis and provide you with it. But we also have a SaaS platform where you can sign up and you can do it as frequently as you would like for your organization. So it depends a lot on the different types of organizations, what type of compliance mandates they have, or what type of cybersecurity programs they've implemented.
Yeah, in a more practical sense, it really boils down to how the frequency of significant changes within their infrastructure, their network, and really as all cybersecurity decisions, they all roll back up to just the value of the assets that we're protecting. And so everything obviously has a time and money trade-off. So, but the nice thing with this is that it's so easy to deploy, and just, it doesn't require a great deal of organizational change in order to see the benefits from it. So,
yeah, I second what Sean mentioned. These endpoint detection solutions, your network, everything out there, there's patching and updates going on all the time. Okay. I would recommend at least monthly that this test be ran, because there could be something that was updated, one of these agents on an endpoint. There could be a patch that was deployed that wasn't deployed correctly. There could be something that was done, by the team that opened a door that just yesterday was closed. And this tool is a way to see that, obviously it's not going to try to exploit that vulnerability, as Mike mentioned, but what it could do is that if it does increase the risk of us getting hit with ransomware, or significantly increases the impact of what a ransomware attack would deliver on our organization, this is going to be able to highlight that for you. And to Mike's point, if you buy the application, okay, and you buy this on a subscription model, how we're doing this now is unlimited usage. So why wouldn't you do that? Okay. There's nothing wrong with again, validation of that process. And to Sean's point, this isn't a difficult lift. Okay, but it could be extremely valuable if you're able to uncover a specific vulnerability that to the network that was open through an update or something like that you just weren't aware of last week. So that would be my recommendation, because organizations, if they are truly putting together a program and a process of vulnerability management, there are patches that come out all the time, and those things need to be deployed as quickly as possible. And testing those types of things, any way that you can validate that those things are done correctly, the better. It's just going to give you a better return on your investment, of the Cimerex application.
Yeah, I think Ronald Reagan said it best: trust but verify.
There you go.
All right. How does the continuous evolution of ransomware impact the development of I knew I was going to screw up this word. Efficacy of simulation platforms.
Yeah, I'll take that first, because it's a kind of tech specific. But as I mentioned in the first slide, there constantly thousands and thousands of new variants coming out every day of different types of malware. But what we uncovered utilizing some of our our own proprietary technology around analyzing malware, as well as working with industry partners like the MITRE Corporation. Um, there's some commonalities across the board. Yeah, there may be new variants, but the new variants aren't really doing it differently. They're doing it in the same way, but they are, using a different type of encryption mechanism, for example, or they're adding an extra dot or two to the end of a file name. But they're still trying to do the same fundamental thing, like, for example, dumping credentials. That's basically, once they get, the original infection in place, they try to, dump all of the username and passwords off of that computer they've infected so that they can then use those to potentially laterally move throughout the organization. That's a very common thing to happen. In fact, it happens in almost 100% of every piece of malware, over the last 10 years. So that's why we've built this around this concept of we're not looking at specifically, trying to keep up with the arms race of all the new stuff that's coming out, unless it's something, wildly new, what's called a technique, tactic, or procedure. We already have those baked in, so it's the system has some ability to keep up on its own without having to, analyze every single component and aspect.
Well, another piece to this too as well is also looking at from the other side of the fence is how does the continuous evolution of ransomware impact the development and efficacy of the endpoint detection solutions, right? Because they have to also be educated on what to see, okay? And we already know that there's a distance between that. Okay, it's that's where the 0-day attacks come into play, right? These pieces of ransomware are something that no tool's been educated on yet, that the company gets hit with, typically devastating. What's great about our technology here is that we can actually show people what that looks like, right? That's huge, right? So you want to understand, the efficacy of the platforms. Yeah, we can talk a little bit about that, but what are we really trying to understand here? What we're trying to understand is we're trying to figure out that delta between the bad guys out there and the technologies that we currently have in place. What if something lands in that open space? Okay. If it lands in the other space it already knows of anything about, it should, we can test that too as well, right? With a piece of known malware. Okay, we call it a no knowledge test. Right, it lands in that section. We can validate the tool's going to catch it. Okay, perfect, you're good. Okay, but now let's talk about that, that other zone. Okay, where no one knows what's going on there. It's uncharted territory. It's where those guys are at, where the technology starts. There is a gap. It's already known. That gap is even going to get larger with artificial intelligence. So how can we start to understand as a business what is the impact of our technology not keeping up with the bad guys, because they never will. Okay, we're always chasing the right white rabbit and we're never going to catch it. Okay, it's unfortunate, but that's just the facts of the matter, right? That's the value of what we do here with our Cimerex platform, right? Who cares about the efficacy of the solution platforms? That's great. That's not what we're testing as our tools. What we're testing is the tools you guys have in place. Whether our tools, we can actually mimic what it looks like for your tools not to know what's going on. Okay, and Mike can actually talk about some existing customers that we've taken through this process. One of them was a large school system, right? That we hit them with a 0-day type of scenario, and they're like, oh, well, we've already got that kind of figured out. Well, what's your plan? Well, what we're going to do is, we're going to have, all the network segments. We've got 4 different segments, and it's if we launch it in this area, it should be contained in this area, and we'll be able to still continue because these other areas will be safe. Okay, we did the test, and come to find out, nope. The segmentation wasn't there. It not only went from segment 1 to segment 2, but to segment 3 and segment 4. They had been completely locked up, and they had no idea, right? So what we're able to do here, when we talk about the evolution of ransomware and the revolution of the ransomware impact, okay, I think that we also really need to talk about here is the 0-day attacks, because that's really kind of the evolving process that everybody's really trying to understand. Because if everybody already knows about this stuff, those should be very minimal. They should be shut down by a lot of endpoint detection solutions. The damage there should be very minimal. But when we start looking at the evolution of of the space and the different things that are coming out and the new changes that are coming out and how that's going to impact my business, we're able to actually show you that too as well. And Mike can talk to you a little bit about those. Mike, what are your thoughts on that? The evolution of that, the 0-day piece, some of those things. I mean, I think that's a huge thing that we need to focus on as companies, to really kind of take a layer deeper than, hey, we can just stop a standard piece of malware that everyone already knows about. That's fantastic. What about the stuff that's evolving and coming out that nobody knows about?
Yeah, and it's that what we're talking about there is really getting to the left of boom, right? So it's trying to be more proactive about analyzing different types of scenarios and simulations within your environment so that you can understand the potential impact of a 0-day. No one really does that today. And I think that's something significant that we're bringing to the table here, is the ability to kind of see in the future a little bit, and make some predictions about, what if a 0-day, a brand new 0-day, and for those of you who don't know, a 0-day vulnerability is basically, it's a brand new vulnerability that comes out. It could be a software vulnerability, it could be a new technique, tactic, or procedure that the bad guys are using, but there's no known defense against it and no known patch to prevent it from happening. And they come out all the time. Usually handful a year. They're not frequent, but they do come out a lot. And there's not a lot of them, but it's when they happen, that's when you see the big ransomware cases explode all over the news media. That's when you see the big attacks take place. And our service enables you to forecast that a little bit and to be able to actually predict how your defenses would be able to respond in the event of something like that.
Yeah, when we talk to client partners, we hear the same thing over and over again. We don't have enough budget. We don't have enough people, but they have all the responsibility. And what I love about the PassPoint solution is that if you employ this in your cybersecurity strategy, you're covering a pretty big base. You're eliminating that potential gap from that update that could exist in that endpoint security solution. We'll move on to the next question. This one is interesting. Considering PassPoint's use of reverse engineered malware samples, how does a simulation platform adapt to new threats and ensure simulations remain realistic and beneficial for organizations?
Yeah, I may have gotten ahead of myself and kind of answered this question on the last one, but yeah, the same concept. If I didn't come across before, is that we do reverse engineer malware samples. In building this platform, we looked at tens of thousands of them. We mapped those to the MITRE ATT&CK framework to be able to find that commonality between all of them, and we built in that functionality of that commonality into our agent. And as new types of attacks come out, or techniques and procedures, we've continuously incorporate those into the agent. We're in fact looking at right now incorporating supply chain attack vectors into this, and how that would function, because that's got a lot of media attention with SolarWinds attack last year. And is continuing to get some, the SEC and the feds are really starting to hammer down on looking at supply chain attacks. In fact, with NIST's latest cybersecurity framework 2.0 that was just released a week or two ago, that's one of their specific functions, is looking at SaaS providers, looking at that supply chain attack vector. And we already take a look at that to some degree with our capabilities today, but we're building in even more capabilities around that. So just bringing it back, we focus on the how this is taking place and the why the response is the way it is, not necessarily exactly what's taking place. So that allows us to have a much more broader approach to this, without having to dig into, well, how does every single piece of specific malware do this thing? We say, all right, we know that 99.999% of malware out there is going to try to dump credentials. So we build in the capability to dump credentials.
Great. All right, moving on to the next question. Can you discuss the role of breach and attack simulation in modern cyber defense strategies, particularly in regard with the MITRE ATT&CK framework and how it enhances an organization's ability to identify and mitigate vulnerabilities before they are exploited in a real-world attack? It's a long question.
I'll take
Could
the
be a
first
long
stab.
answer.
Yeah, I'll take the first stab in that, and I think Sean's probably got some interesting comments on it as well. For those of you who don't know, the MITRE ATT&CK framework was designed by the MITRE Corporation, which is a quasi, government-private partnership, and research organization. They research a lot of different things, not just cybersecurity, but cybersecurity is one of the big ones. And they came up with this concept of around. It was building off some other defense in depth concepts or cyber kill chain style of concepts over the years that had been developed, and it's really become the industry standard of essentially walking you through. There's these different phases that take place during any attack, and there's different things that take place in each phase. Just to give you an example of some of the phases would be like execution, persistence, defense evasion, credential access, discovery, collection, command and control, data exfiltration. Those are all different phases that can take place in literally any attack or almost every attack. And that's why the framework has really been as well received as it has been. So that's what a breach and attack simulation really does, is, if it does it correctly, is leverage that MITRE ATT&CK framework to be able to walk through that entire cyber kill chain to prove out, okay, what's taking place during the execution phase, what's taking place during the command and control phase, what's taking place during the credential access phase. And, there's lots of different steps in each one of those phases. So that's the role, essentially. And Sean, did you want to add something to that?
That was perfect. I mean, the key focus point here is a simulation and how close we can get to the real thing, right? And that's really what the culmination of the last 3 years of development has led us to at this point in this service. So at some point, I hope you can show that. That's really the meat and potatoes of it. So
Great. We'll move on to the next question then. Given your platform's detailed reporting features, including step-by-step lateral attack paths and visual roadmaps for remediation, what are some of the most surprising or enlightening findings organizations have discovered through simulations? How have these insights led to tangible improvements in cyber resilience?
Yeah, I'll start first on that, and it's kind of bouncing off what Wade said earlier. And one of our customers, higher ed organization, the very first thing in the simulation that we ran there that immediately popped up is we identified that one of their end users had way more elevated credentials than they should have had. And that's something that organizations struggle with on a continuous basis, is getting, does Bob really need to be an admin? Does Bob need to be a global domain admin, right? Or can we reduce Bob's privilege level to just enough of what he needs in order to be able to do his job? And what we discovered there was Bob had domain admin, and we were able to, as Wade mentioned, the platform was able to immediately capture Bob's credentials, utilize Bob's credentials over WMI, which is Windows Management Instrumentation. It's a way for Windows computers to talk to each other, and then to copy itself over to every server within the environment, and then to replicate itself and spread across multiple network segments, all because of that one mistake. And Bob did not need to be that level of an admin. And had that been a real world attack, I think we ended up saying that they had over 600 systems that would have been encrypted, and over I think it was well over 300,000 files, including student information, records, health records, and things like that. So yeah, that was probably one of the more surprising ones. Sean, or Wade, did you have another one you were thinking about?
Yeah, I had one too as well, Mike, where we we did this on a recently deployed endpoint detection solution for a electrical grid. Okay, and we did the test. It was literally we did the test. We were complete. Got the test complete. Yeah, they called us up and said, "Hey, when are you guys going to start?" No, we're already done. And they're like, "What do you mean you're already done?" No, we're finished. We're actually finalizing the report. We should have it to you by the end of the week. And what that showed was, kind of going back to the first slides, 3 out of 4 organizations that got hit with ransomware had these tools in place. Their tool didn't even notice we were there. Oof. And we didn't even have to run a 0-day. We didn't have to run any of that stuff. This was a 101 test. Okay, this is a complete misconfiguration and implementation of the technology. We were able to discover that, and get the organization back on the line to then redeploy the technology, walk them through what we were able to see, which then showed them, what could have happened. So talk about, living in a false sense of security. Again, going back to those organizations who want to just have that easy pill. Okay, they don't want to put in the effort of validating. They don't want to put the effort of putting together the programs and the process, that multi-layer security strategy that you need to not only identify, fix, but the big thing here is then to validate that those things are actually done, and then continuously do that over time, because it is obviously an ever-changing threat landscape. So what we were able to do there was identify that they had, we knew that they had recently, launched a new endpoint solution, and we were able to discover that it wasn't done, and they were able to fix it. And then we were able to go back and retest it again to validate that, hey, look, see the difference? We would have encrypted everything, and now we're not getting off the first computer. So, it's what's the value there? That's critical infrastructure too, right? So, what is the value? How many hospitals would have been out of power? How many homes would have been out of power? How many nursing homes? How many schools? Tens of thousands of people. This was to a large metropolitan area in the Southeast. Okay, so when you start looking at that, what is that value? It's you can't even put a dollar amount on it. So that was a big one. The school was a big one. And we could spend a lot of time on this slide talking about a lot of other things that we've done with this, with this technology. But those are 2 big ones there that validate the need, for this type of solution. One of them, to Mike's point, identified, that was just a bad policy that the organization had implemented. Had nothing really to do with it from a technological perspective, but it had a huge implication in regards to what happened in a ransomware attack. The second one that I was talking about was more of a technology flaw that we were able to identify. So there's so many things that we can bring to the table with our ransomware impact analysis. It's not about just testing, the tools that you have in place. It's the policies and procedures. It's about everything else. It's the organizational controls holistically that you have in place. That's the value of what we're bringing to the table here. How do you put a price tag on that?
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't have any exotic stories like that, I must admit, but I can tell you that one constant objection or really challenge, I guess, is that a lot of times the cybersecurity practitioner or the IT stakeholder is often finding a hard time to convey the need for this to the higher ups, the C-suite. If they don't already foster a culture of cybersecurity in the organization, that's often a tough, challenging battle. And this really goes a long way to sort of illuminate some of those shortcomings. So everybody's business is valuable to them, their own assets. These stories are wonderful, but because they do show the impact or the power of this platform, which we're about to see. But really it's all about testing controls and validating that our investments in these very expensive solutions are doing what they're meant to do. So.
Okay. No, great answers. Appreciate that. So earlier in this webinar, we talked a little bit about knowing your blast radius. How does knowing your blast radius influence the way organizations prepare for and respond to ransomware attacks? Who'd like to take that on?
Sure, I'll hop on that one.
Sure.
Pretty simple here. So the thing is, like going back to the, to the electrical grid that we just talked about. Okay, the cost to remediate something like that, of basically a complete failure of the entire security program that they have in place, it would have been, I can't even put a number on it. Okay, millions they wish it probably have been that number. Okay, so so understanding and knowing your blast radius is a huge thing. Okay, there's two things that we're doing here. Number one is that there's the blast radius of understanding how a well-known piece of malware is going to affect the organization, but also understanding, the 0-day piece. If we can give people visibility into what that looks like from a 0-day perspective, there could be ways out there that they could reorg the network to significantly reduce, if not completely eliminate, the impact of a ransomware attack on their organization. Okay, that is big. Okay, Sean likes to say all the time, tomorrow's news today, right? I love it. Okay, and that's a great thing. And what we're doing with this technology is really giving them tomorrow's bad news today. Instead of being the front page of the paper and sitting there for weeks figuring out what they're going to do to wipe and reissue every single piece of hardware they've got. I mean, it would be nice to know what the blast radius was prior to that. Understand how could we potentially minimize this. Maybe there's not even a cost involved in doing that, just simply some network reconfiguration. That's valuable information. So knowing your blast radius is huge, because it allows the organization to understand and prepare for the size and magnitude of what could potentially come on. And then how, from a response perspective, how much time do they think that they could potentially would have to, invest in something like this? We can show them that through these types of simulations.
Yeah, when you look at the MGM attack, there was certainly a pretty large blast radius there, right? From what I saw, you couldn't access a room, you couldn't use your player's card, you couldn't use slot machines, restaurants didn't take credit cards, you couldn't check in rooms. So that blast radius becomes a very important component of understanding the potential damage and vulnerability that can be done as well.
Mm-hmm. And how do you minimize that blast radius?
Yep.
Right. Mike, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, just a little more tactically around that. I mean, that's obviously a very strategic and business blast radius, but tactically, it's seeing how far deep and wide that potential attack could spread through your organization. Did it make it all the way to your backup drive, right? Did it make it all the way to your cloud assets? So that's really what it's about. It's like all everything in everywhere all at once. Great movie, but also very apropos to what we're talking about. And that's what it's all about. It comes from this military technology of, what's the blast radius when a bomb goes off, right? The things in a very narrow focus blast radius are going to be completely obliterated, right? Everything's going to go down. But as it moves out from there, you want to know exactly what is survivable. Where do you get to that survivable edge of the blast radius? And I think that's what this shows.
Great. Sean, do you have anything you want to add, sir?
No, sir. That's perfect.
Great. All right, compliance. Compliance is always a challenge to manage, considering the varied compliance requirements across sectors such as HIPAA, GLBA, and FISMA. How does an attack simulation aid organizations in not just meeting these compliance standards, but also in enhancing their incident response strategies? Gentlemen?
Well, I mean, I think certainly understanding, if you go through an exercise like this, if you employ a service like Cimerex, it's just a demonstration that you have a much more mature cybersecurity awareness and posture within your organization, because you're testing these controls that you've presumably already put in place. And that in itself can certainly enhance an incident response strategy, because it's going to expedite the time that it takes you to get back to your recovery point objective, right? And planning is obviously a much more planning for an incident is obviously a much more productive than experiencing it and running around panicked and not knowing what to do. So, but you mentioned HIPAA and GLBA, FISMA, and such. We use these frameworks not simply so that we can adhere to a framework. We use these frameworks so that we can use them as a guide. I mean, we do have regulatory requirements to adhere to them, but they're about protecting our own assets, and they're about protecting our customers' data. And so that's really what should stay in focus. And there's, as we've been discussing, nothing does that better than understanding and testing these controls and making sure that if an incident occurs, it's a very, very small one. So
yeah, and there's a great I don't know if Sun Tzu said it originally, but it's been attributed to him a lot. But no plan survives the first contact with the enemy, right? And that's where we're in all the years I've been doing this, and one of the original impetuses to come up for Cimerex was working with these companies who had unfortunately had a very impactful incident, whether it was ransomware or business email compromise or some such different attack. And what I discovered was very quickly, if they had an incident response plan, it wasn't really kept up to date. It wasn't really tested effectively outside of maybe some annual tabletop exercises. And they didn't really know how effective their security controls were, and how they would be able to actually react during a real world attack. And they suffered because of it. And I think you need to have an incident response plan, but if you don't actually test your capabilities with that incident response plan, you're going to fail.
And really, sorry, wait, go for it.
Yeah, I was going to add that, Mike. The other thing is that what this does is, you mentioned tabletop exercises. Absolutely fantastic, and we do a ton of tabletop exercises. But the problem with tabletop exercises is it's all make-believe. Okay, they're all assumptions. Okay, and there's no way that you could really prepare yourself through make-believe assumption stuff. Okay, because you may be assuming this, and that has nothing to do with what would have actually happened in real life with your organizational setup. What we can do with the Cimerex application is we can actually bring reality into a response tabletop exercise. So instead of hypothetically thinking, hey, this is what could potentially happen, no, actually, let's actually talk about what really is going to happen and prepare for it. I mean, I don't think that, I don't know, maybe that's common sense. I can't think of anything else to call it, but if I was going to say, look, if I knew that I was about to get into a fight, and I knew the first 5 things that person was going to do prior to him doing it, do you think that would give me a strategic advantage in that boxing match? I think it would. If I knew he's going to come out with a left jab, right hook, left uppercut, and I could then prepare myself for exactly how I would combat that, do you think that that's not going to give me a strategic advantage? Absolutely it is. Okay, so why would you go out there and train for a fight, okay, and look at every potential, thing that could potentially happen? Or why don't we just narrow this down to exactly what's going to happen and prepare for that? And then get that strategic advantage of knowledge on knowing exactly what's going to happen and test and train on. I don't know if you can get any. I mean, that is the. I think that's maybe even the definition of common sense, right? Let's work smarter, not harder. Let's not work on every single thing under the sun. Let's focus on exactly what's going to happen. We can do that with this test, right? let's not talk about all the hypotheticals. Let's talk about reality. Okay, understand that, and then let's actually then test and train on reality. That's what I think we could do there, Mike. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, isn't that kind of what we're kind of able to do, is really kind of cut away the fat and really focus on the on the meat?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's specifically focusing on the ability to test for a real world attack, right? And being able to actually simulate that exactly as it would be without causing any harm, without actually causing any of the negative consequences.
Yeah.
Um,
And
that's
to train on
that's
this.
that's
And to
what that
train on
it's
that.
all about training. Yep.
Yeah, and to be able to train on that, on actually what's going to happen, I think is a way better use of time than because we all talk about these organizations and the people and them not having time and things like that. Stop wasting everybody's time. Let's focus on exactly what you need to know. We can give you that answer.
Great. All right, cybersecurity investments, especially for SMBs and SMEs, can be significant. Is it possible to demonstrate the cost effectiveness of ransomware versus the costs associated with recovering from an actual ransomware attack? So your RAA as opposed to a ransomware attack. How do you show people the benefit in that investment?
Well, I mean,
Go ahead, Sean. Sorry.
no, I was just going to say there are formulas that the industry uses to sort of unpack this a bit further and quantify the value of an assets in an organization, either quantitatively or qualitatively, and it's often difficult to pinpoint it, but through the that business impact analysis process, which of course is another forte of past points, it is very possible to get down to a pretty accurate quantifiable dollar amount based on how long would it, or how much would it cost if we were damaged by a ransomware attack, if we were out of operation for a certain amount of time. So and of course I mean, I'll just say that. Wade, what were you going to say?
Well, I think it's really simple. There's one data point. It's a Forbes data point. It's absolutely perfect, and it's specifically for small to medium-sized businesses. And that data point is 60% of small to medium-sized businesses that have a business disruption from a cyber breach go out of business within 6 months. I don't know. Put a dollar amount on that.
Yeah.
Half of them, over half of the companies close their doors that have a cyber breach in the small to medium-sized business sector within 6 months. Okay. If we could do anything to help you keep your business, I don't know what sort of benefit there is for you, but that's what this is. That's what this is worth. So what's the ROI? A couple $1,000s, a month versus losing your business potentially, right? And I'm not trying to scare people, but that's just the data point. Talk to Forbes about it, right? So when you look at what is the ROI that we're doing here, because you also want to. It's very, very difficult to put a dollar amount on a ransomware attack. I mean, obviously you can talk about the hardware, and all that sort of stuff, but you also got to take it about what's the value of your reputational damage? What's the value of, potential lost customer fallout over the next, 6 to 12 months? What's the initial customer loss? Are they all going to stick with you? Are they all going to leave? How unique is your product? Can they go get this screw anyplace else in the world? Or they have to buy it from you, right? I mean, there's so many other aspects in there. So that's why, I mean, you can argue this point one way or another, but I think when you really boil it down to small to medium-sized businesses, the Forbes data point's perfect. 60% of these organizations that had a ransomware attack or a cyber breach closed their doors within 6 months. That is a significant impact on their organization, and it's due to the fact that they just can't weather the storm, right? Like a lot of the large enterprise level organizations can. So now when you talk about the cost effectiveness of our product, it becomes, very, very affordable to validate, some of the tools that you currently have in place. Like Mike said earlier in some of the slides about the person having the credentials, validate the programs and the processes and things like that you got in place. I don't think that there's, I don't think there's really a another option, in my opinion, right? For small to medium-sized businesses, why would you not make this small investment to validate these things that you've got in place? Because the ramifications of not doing it could be, over half the time losing your business.
Mike, I would imagine that this is probably a big part of your engagements that you, or am I wrong about that? I mean, it's such a valuable tool and gives you such insight. Do you make it part of your BIA engagements?
We haven't yet, but that is certainly coming down the pipe is to incorporate the ransomware impact assessment included with the BIA. We do kind of a little bit of a lightweight BIA up front when we're talking to customers and doing these one-off consulting engagements for the RIA, the ransomware impact assessment. We do ask questions about like, what kind of assets do you have on your network? Where are they stored? What's the criticality? So we get some of that up front. But yeah, we're definitely looking at incorporating this into a full-blown business impact assessment in the future.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. All right, big question. How do you see simulation platforms evolving to meet new challenges, including AI and machine learning? We just saw a data point recently that of the businesses that were attacked, 75% reported the use of AI as the mechanism to that attack. That's a big number. So how do you address that, Mike?
Yeah, so a couple of different ways. That's absolutely correct. Just even if they're just using the AI chatbots to be able to generate their phishing emails, they're sounding more realistic. They're sounding more like a natural native English speaker, which that's always been a kind of a dead giveaway in the past. Bad bad grammar, bad language in the phishing email. Made it pretty obvious, and the detection tools, anti-spam and anti-phishing tools that were trained in order to be able to recognize things like that, that's kind of gone out the window. They're absolutely using AI to be able to create and craft better targeted phishing emails. We're already seeing that happen, absolutely, which is making it easier for that email to get delivered and the end user then to be more easily convinced to click on the link, which will cause the initial infection of what we call patient zero. That's the initial infection inside of any type of hot zone. So that is absolutely happening, and that just furthermore justifies the need to be able to understand your blast radius, right? Because that the threat has risen significantly there. But on the back end, we're using, we utilize this in our other services, our AI verified pen testing. We do have our own AI solutions in house. The Cimerix agent, which is the software app that actually gets deployed to run inside of a network, actually has some limited artificial intelligence in it today, so that it acts more like a human being would in actually performing these attack scenarios versus something that just looks like an automated robot running out there. And that allows us to be, more accurately reflect a real world simulation. So we're leveraging all of that with inside the platform, with inside the agent, and then also with inside our own consultants to be able to utilize our own personal and private AI to make them better and more effective at their job.
Yeah, I agree here. The biggest challenge I see with AI is the speed at which the threat landscape is going to change. Okay. Yes. They're already ahead of us. Let's just say a mile. Okay. Just to kind of put this as what is AI going to do? Is that going to put them ahead of us 10 miles, right? Or 2 or 5? I can tell you it's going to be increased. That's the problem, right? Which then also includes, I think that just increases the value of the 0-day portion of our solution, right? Being able to see, what could potentially happen on, like, Mike mentioned those new TTPs that they may come out with, right? Those things are going to be able to evolve and come to market faster, leveraging AI and machine learning, which is going to now uptick the likelihood of zero-day attacks. And from there, these types of simulations that we can run, with not only the known malware specimens, but the unknown malware specimens, just becomes that much more valuable, to our customers.
Yeah, AI sophistication is kind of scary, isn't it? I probably have 7 different phishing attempts in my Gmail right now from Ace Hardware and Best Buy and Home Depot. And it's if you don't check carefully, make sure where that email is coming from. If you're not checking the phone number to validate it, you can easily get caught up in those phishing attacks. So want to see if there's any remaining questions from our audience for the panelists. And if not, let you get back to your busy days. I know you have a lot going on. Always.
Good questions.
Yeah, I don't see any questions yet. Any last items either any one of you would like to add before we close out this webinar? I know the product offering is strong. Is there anything you want to tell us about the product in terms of how they reach out to you, how they set an appointment, that sort of stuff? One way you can reach out to me, but certainly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, well, first off, just want to appreciate everybody's time. I think this is a huge topic. I was reading an article yesterday that talks about the number one threat facing organizations today, is cybersecurity, underscored by ransomware. Right. So this is the number one thing that keeps people up at night, from an IT perspective, is security in general, with that flavor of ransomware and, mixed in there. Okay. This is a massive, massive problem. Okay. And it's only going to get bigger. We're just, tipping the iceberg as organizations become more connected, as more people rely on technology, so, the thing is that I think that this is a great value proposition for organizations. It's a different way of looking at security from a more proactive manner versus is what Sean mentioned earlier, that reactive manner. Okay, instead of sitting back waiting, I hope we've got these things in place. I hope these tools are going to withstand a blast. I hope they're going to minimize the impact on our organization. Newsflash, hope's not a very good strategy. Okay, let's validate that stuff. Let's know that these tools are going to work. Let's know that we're going to minimize, the blast radius. Let's know some of these things. Let's start working in realistic, real world types of scenarios versus all these hypotheticals. This tool can do that. I think it's going to be a great value out there. So I really appreciate everybody's time and learning more a little bit about what we're doing here at PassPoint and with the Cimerex application, and really excited to work with the technology source team, and reach out to Rob if you'd like to schedule some time, and we'll be more than happy to walk you through a demo.
Yeah, and don't worry, we know you don't have the budget in many cases, and we can look at other services in your existing portfolio, and most often we can find price reductions in other parts of your business that'll fund this type of service. So thanks again for everyone. Thanks to our panelists, Wade Tucker, Sean Mooney, Mike Pearson, for making time to educate us today about what's happening in this space. And certainly sounds like you have some fantastic solutions to help us deal with the ransomware threat. So thanks everyone again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
We'll be up next month for the virtual roundtable with Technology Source. Hope to see you then.